My core theme in this very short presentation is to say that from my perspective and the work that I do, what you have to do is to demonstrate its relevance. Demonstrate its relevance to the wider world and also perhaps to specific stakeholders. So what I've done is just come up with some examples. None of these have I been involved in at all. These are initiatives, ideas, products, either finished products or ideas in development that I think demonstrate the kinds of activities that you should be thinking about in terms of demonstrating the relevance of what you're doing to the wider world and to those people who are funding you. Could I just ask a question before we start? Who actually actively delivers and participates in what we might call dissemination? Traditional, who actively does it? Hands up a bit higher so I can see. Okay. Who tells other people what they should do in terms of dissemination or provide support in action? Okay, right. I have a mantra that I never ask anybody that I'm involved in to do something that I have not done, in terms of whether it's a television interview or whether it's taking part in a public debate. I never ask anybody to do something I'm not prepared to do myself. And I think actually when you're trying to encourage people who are less confident, less competent, might I say, through lack of experience, then if you've actually done it yourself, that really is a big plus in being able to support them through that experience, perhaps for the first time. I think that's a really important thing to think about, particularly for people who are coming up with brilliant ideas at very early stage and need to have that support in order to get to that first step of being actively involved in real engagement. Let's not call it dissemination, real communications, engagement, interactivity, two-way communication. So, I've only got a few minutes, I'm going to show you a few examples. What's most important here is to think about how these products, projects, ideas have actually demonstrated the relevance to society through the method they've chosen. And I think we can think about these in clusters as in terms of the success of these ways of communicating. V for visual, I for interactive, and P for personal. And I think the absolute fundamental shift over the last couple of years in any kind of effective communication is the visual aspect. We have to think visually about how we are going to put across what we're saying, what we're doing, what we're investing in, what we hope will actually become a very marketable, successful new idea or product. So here's just a few examples. First one. This is from the Vapor Corporation. This is an e-cigarette which works on a fingerprint technology. Nobody else but you can actually take a drag on that cigarette, which means that nobody in the office can pick it up. You can leave it around the house and your children can't pick it up. So it has a direct relevance to the community in the sense of people who are smokers. This is something that they have thought about very seriously and come up with an idea. And they've used a visual approach through going to the media and successfully, obviously, gaining a media company to put this message across for them. The next way to think about this visually is to produce a demonstration. And the second example here is super hydrophobic materials. These are materials that stay dry. Company is always dry. I'm sure some of you have seen their videos. Basically, you know, if wine goes down your suit and your suit's been sprayed with this stuff, then it doesn't stain. If you're in the restaurant and your shirt's sprayed with, you're with your kids and your shirt is sprayed with this stuff, then the tomato ketchup that comes flying across the table will not stick. And if you look at YouTube, you'll see some wonderful demonstrations here of the practical applications of this new technology, based, of course, in nature. The idea came up, and they've got a video showing the lily pad and how that lily pad rejects the water. The third example here is animation, trying to explain synthetic biology. And this animation actually talks about the applications of synthetic biology. It doesn't talk about the theory, it talks about how it's going to be applied. And sometimes with new technologies, what you've got to do is to look at the broader issue, not at the specific thing that you are developing and thinking about. Put it in the context of the issue, and you're much more likely to get pick up in the media if that's what you want, on YouTube if that's what you want, make your website much more interesting. So 3 visual ideas then, just a very small example of some very interesting ways of doing that. I for interactive. Going back to one of the important things that Furman said, he put it in that context, tell me something and I might remember it, show me something and I'm more likely to remember it. We know from research that that is true. We remember about 70% of everything we see, which is quite extraordinary, but we only remember about 10% of what we hear. Very interestingly, in this audience, although on average we will all only remember 10% of what we hear, each one of us will remember a different 10%. So there's no consistency, if you like, about how that message has been received. It's really important that you get that engagement, interactivity. We know it works. I just got an email this morning from UFIC, where they've just reported on a new research project. Very groundbreaking results, which basically says that if you're trying to teach children about food hygiene, it's much more effective if you actually take them through practical exercises rather than thinking in theory, telling them about the theory of it. That's groundbreaking. Not. It's something we've known forever. So 3 examples here. So the first one, design and test. So here the company has used, again, a cartoon kind of approach, animation, and this is around gene therapy. So here you have 3 alien patients. You're given the patient notes. You had to decide, decide on the DNA and on the test. You have to decide the test that you're going to give, the tissue that you're going to attack, and the vector you're going to use. And at the end of that game, you're told whether the patient is going to live or not, depending on the things that you have chosen. So it's an innovative way, it's an animation way, but it's also about actually getting people to think through particular problems. Very interactive indeed. The second example, this is a company called E. coli, I think it's called. No, not E. coli, that's not what I'm talking about. Yes, it is. Eero coli, 2D adventure game. And this is serious gaming, and I'm sure some of you have actually come across serious gaming. It's actually being used in many environments now, universities, policy-making units, where they're actually pulling together elements that make people interact with each other, make decisions, and see the outcome of those decisions. This is about a game that has a tiny nano-robot as the hero of this game, and when players are in there, they're given obstacles and challenges. And what they've got to do is they've got to collect and combine DNA fragments in order to engineer the robot's abilities to actually overcome those challenges. So again, very, very interactive indeed. Third example here, data collection. This is a headset that clamps to the user's ear here and actually measures the heart rate. And it actually measures the heart rate as the gamer is actually playing the game. And the idea is that actually as the heart rate goes up, the level of difficulty in that game actually comes down until the heart rate is regulated. And the aim here the researchers are looking at is actually to reduce gamer rage. And I'm sure some of you who've got teenage children clamp to sets of some kind, or using up the television when you want to watch something else, and getting very angry because they can't actually get to the next level. Maybe this will help actually to manage that. The next one is personal. This is about valuing, feeding back, interacting with the individuals who are either giving you the data, giving you information, or in fact receiving information. The first example here, again I'm sure people have seen this, Ocean Outdoor. It's a big outdoor advertising organisation. This example here is in Canary Wharf. which is obviously has a huge number of people going through each week. I think it's about more than 750,000. And the idea here is that the hoarding, the animated hoarding on the side here, advertising here, changes according to the demographic. So each week they are recording the people who are going by through facial recognition. They're deciding the age and the gender and also the frequency of those people coming through. And that is then fed to advertising agencies who then actually change their adverts in order to match the main profiles of the people actually walking by. When that shot was taken, apparently, I think it was the very high-end earning male gender, which is dominant in Canary Wharf, that's being advertised there. So people like Santander, car manufacturers are using this site very optimally. And I'm sure you've seen these video advertising hoards now where they actually speak to you as you go by. I don't know if anybody's come across those, but again, it's the same kind of thing where it's picked up the kind of person you are and it will respond according to who you are. 2 or 3 book publishers are doing this incredibly successfully within bookshops now. Quite extraordinary. The second example, this is more of a traditional area, but it's still something that is very valuable. And this is the collection of opinions, data, responses to questionnaires, to create a report about people's view. Wellcome Trust example here, where they were collecting information about people's views about gene therapy. And what was so important was that the people who were contributing their views knew what was going to happen with that information that they were contributing. This actually went into a very prestigious report that was laid before Parliament, laid before specialist committees, about how to actually plan to think about engaging people in planning gene therapy trials going forward. The last example here, again, traditional in communications terms, but maybe something that you within this sector don't think about very much, and that's personal stories. The media live on personal stories, because that's what we're after all the time, understanding human interaction, understanding human impact, so that there's empathy created with the stories that are being delivered. This was used by a charity that was developing a clinical trial on gene therapy for heart failure. And what happened was that this guy who has got heart failure was asked about his views on whether there should be clinical trials regarding this, because obviously there's ethical questions around clinical trials, who will be in the trial, who will not be in the trial, how long, when will it be stopped if there's adverse reactions and so on. And his contribution is heartfelt, genuine, authentic, and is the most important part of that media coverage piece. There was a lab visit, there was an animation, but what everybody says they remember is his human story. So I've tried to give you some examples there. There's many. I think the principles of using visual techniques, interactive techniques, something personal that either impacts on the person themselves or makes that person feel valued, or a story that they can relate to is absolutely vital. And if you're really brave, you can go into something like this, which is all 3, visual, interactive, and definitely personal. Here are children who have the personal power to vote off scientists who have been brave enough to share their views, their work, the actions that they're doing in their lab. And if nobody has looked at this, then do. It's actually an organisation called I'm a Scientist. I'm a Scientist. Don't get me out of here. That's what they want, because they want to keep the children engaged. But the children vote on how well those scientists not only demonstrate their own work, but answer the questions that are put towards them. And as we all know, children are the most honest and also our harshest critics. Okay, thank you.